Welcome to the Partnering with God in Business podcast. We're so glad you could join us. It's our desire to awaken you to what's possible with God in your business, to align you to who you're called to be, and to activate you in the purpose and power of God in your life and in your business. Hey, welcome back to Partnering with God in Business podcast. I'm really excited today with a special guest, but also a friend of mine. This is Todd. Todd runs a company, which you'll kind of explain, but I'm excited because this journey that Todd's been on is a great example of navigating the highs and the lows. It's not just, in the kingdom, a lot of times we talk about partnering with God and we talk about the blessing and the increase and the favor, and we're waiting for all those things to take place. But the reality is a journey, and the journey comes with a lot of challenges. It comes with a lot of ups and downs. And, sometimes the myth inside the kingdom is it's supposed to be flourishing. It's going to be the best thing ever. And yes, God promises abundance. God promises us, talks about giving us the ability to make wealth. He talks about thriving in life, always bearing fruit. But there is trials, there's tribulations, there's challenges, there's navigating the unknowns. And so we're going to dive into that and look forward to doing that with you, Todd. But thanks for being here and just sharing your life and your story. Because I know I've shared your testimonies all the time when I'm doing different trainings or podcasts. So I'm glad that you could be on here to share your own. So thanks a lot for being here.
Yeah. Happy to be here, Tim. Honored to be here and looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about your company? What's the name of your company? What do you guys do? How long have you had it? And give me a little history of that.
Yeah. And the company is Kreg Tool Company. So it's a family business started by my parents about 35 years ago. We are in the woodworking tool business. So it's kind of a niche category. Doing that, I've been involved with it. 35 years ago, I was 14. And, I started in the business in the backyard making product and worked in the business for the next 9 years on and off part-time as I finished high school and college, and then 7 months in public accounting. And I joined the business here.
So tell me a little bit about how you used to function as a CEO and a business owner as you've grown. And then what are some of the changes that happened that you started kind of involving God a little bit more? And what did you see from that process?
Yeah. Well, so I grew up kind of Christian, and so God has, been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I was a little further from God when I started in the business. Kind of came back to my faith, I think, if you were to say. But I always felt like I was working for God, or that was an important part of it. But for me, my journey and kind of my framework really changed post 2016. So I was asked by a pastor to the church I was at to lead kind of organize and lead a small group of work small groups. So didn't really know what that looked like. God sent me on a little journey that year of just rewiring my grand narrative of God's plan and my place in it. And a lot went into that, but a lot of it was just how I see where we're going, what's the purpose of being here. And Revelation 21 talks about heaven coming to earth. I always saw myself leaving and going to heaven, but it talks about coming to earth. One of the things it says towards the end of that chapter is in this heaven on earth, the glory of the nations will enter it, and the glory and the honor, and it says nothing impure shall enter it, nor anyone. So it's things will go in there, and it just kind of rewired my what I'm making and what I'm doing here. The Bible says it's going to come into heaven. It's going to go into heaven, and what do I make that goes into this? So it rewired my narrative, kind of the Great Commission of discipling nations. I really saw the work that I was doing, and it framed my work in a much more purposeful ministry calling way than I had previously. So that kind of rewired things and got me into a seeking, how do I partner with God versus how do I do this for God? How do I do this with God? He's calling me to co-create. How do I create a business that honors that, and that I invite people in to co-create based on their God-given gifts and talents? And so that set me on a journey. Shortly after that, I met you, and the prophetic and learning how to hear God was new to me. Started learning how to do that. And I said, this is what's been going on in my business. I want to learn more and really press into it. So it's been a journey along the way.
Yeah. Which I'll go, one of the favorite meetings I've ever had with you was when one time you came on and you said, actually, Tim, I don't got any questions because I've just been asking God and he's been telling me the answers. And I'm like, that's awesome. I don't have to. Now that didn't happen all the time, but it was definitely one of those meetings that I was like, you got it. Like you were learning how to stay connected. But going back to what you're saying, just kind of paraphrasing, it's not like I love the journey that you went on to recognizing I'm not just doing this for God, but I got to do this with God. And it seemed like the mission shifted, the perspective, the approach, and the agenda that you had in your heart of I'm just here to build and I'm just supposed to do things for God and be used, but it's more about God, what is my destiny? How do I look at what I'm called to do, what I'm doing, and what is your heart for that? How do I bring your kingdom, your perspective, your ways in that there's an eternal effect from what I'm doing versus just a temporary effect. And that perspective shift really addresses how you show up, I assume.
Yeah, and it was a exactly a meaningful and important one for me too, because I have always been kind of a visionary leader. From my first trade shows when I was in high school, I could see where this was going. God just gave me visions for it. I didn't think it was God at the time. I just thought it was my brilliance. It was that way. But the business got to the point where, as the visionary leader, I became more and more concerned about getting that right, and kind of post this process in 2016, I really began to see and understand that this company has a purpose. It's got a purpose in heaven, and it's not so much my job to define it as it is to uh, find it, if you will. And part of that isn't just something that I do. It's partly and largely how I create the culture to bring other people in that are going to help it become what it's designed to become.
Yes.
So it kind of took the pressure off me as a leader to see the business from heaven's perspective versus try to create it for God, if you will.
Yeah. So tell me about that though. How did you do that? Like, I mean, obviously there's a lot and it's still unpacking, but how did you start to see God's perspective or heaven's perspective to bring that into your culture? And you have a executive team. They're not all saved. You have other management levels, multiple levels of leadership. So how did you get God's perspective? And then how did you bring application or integration into your business?
Yeah, I think just from my own perspective, that I saw it that way. It really became even more important to define and articulate uh, the culture or the identity, if you will, of the company, and to get that right, so that the company has an identity, so that we are working towards that as a team and bringing that team together. Whether you're saved or not, you're being created by God, and you're you're going to be used in a way when you're within an organization, a company, to advance where it's going. But we gotta know what that is, and so I'd always worked to define that, but I think getting spending a lot more time and effort on defining what's our purpose, what are our values, and what are we trying to do. What's our So we call that our purpose, our values, and our vision, which is where we're trying to go. And then um, after we kind of have that, then it's more about inviting people into that and getting people engaged and understanding when you articulate that, and it's really the job of the owner, in this case my job, to get that.
So you've been a big advocate of helping talking about finding the identity of an organization. We've had conversations about that before. Like you just mentioned it there. What does that mean? Like how do you find the identity of an organization?
Yeah, so I define it as its purpose, its values, its mission, and then ultimately its culture, and how you operate, what you allow. But by defining that, it really gets to what's its purpose, and how's it going to go about doing that. Because what I found, I've kind of so I jumped into president of the organization 2005. In 2012, I kind of stepped out into so went from president to CEO. 2012, kind of got into product development, kind of brought somebody in to manage the day to day of the business. I stepped back into it in 2019 because what I had realized is the identity of the business was too broad. I allowed my desire to bring people in and let them co-create it. It was too broad, and I can go back now and say that I didn't feel say now I didn't feel peace on that because it just didn't feel like the identity. So in my case, I just narrowed it. For us, it's really about being true to woodworking focus. We were in the DIY space. We wanted to be everything DIY, but our brand and our identity and our success, at least at this point, is really around being true to woodworking. And so that was a way to define who we are. A lot of that comes to our vision, but I own that, right? And when we get that right, then we're bringing people in that want to serve that identity, don't want to create a different identity, don't want to bring their identity and go this way. It really has helped to, we talk about kingdom culture. To me, that getting that structure right has everything to do with kingdom culture, because it's around the purpose of the business and the purpose of the people, and creating a thriving environment by getting those things right. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that's gone into the structure of that.
There's a lot of development, a lot of meetings that you've done, a lot of brainstorming, whiteboard sessions, and just trying to figure that out. It's not an easy thing to unpack in just a few minutes. But the thing that I think that when you said it was too broad, I think that's a common theme and a common challenge for people right now. They're doing too many things. Their vision is so broad, trying to reach too many places. And I think it's a common thing the Lord's highlighting right now of honing in the focus and the mandate and the mission of what they're called to do. Because instead of trying to be all things to all people, where we including a lot of other people, which I think is, and we've talked about this before, and I've heard so many CEOs talk about this over the last couple of years, where they let things go to empower, to release. Maybe this next season I'm moving on, and then they come back like, oh, I let it go too soon. I allowed too many people coming in to speak into it. It's got too complex, and I realized that I actually been the one anointed with a vision for this organization. Now there is times of transition, but it was something specifically for you and for others of honing in. What are we called to do? What is our purpose? What are we called to do with our team? What does that look like for our team as well as our customers? And I've got to kind of simplify it. And I feel like what you just said is very profound and prophetic right now in the season that people are in, of simplifying, honing in, getting rid of the excess, trying to get rid of all the extra stuff that we do because it's been good, to who are we really called to be?
Yeah,
Would you agree?
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
want
I
to
mean,
go
a
back.
lot of times I hear God in what not to do as much as what to do.
Tell me about that. What do you mean by that?
There's a lot. So I hear a lot of voices, and there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of ideas. But oftentimes it's about navigating. You can't do everything. So what do you say yes to, and what do you say no to? There's not every opportunity is going to be a good one, and more so than anything, it's I've said yes to opportunities in the past where, hindsight being what it is, going, yeah, I didn't feel peace on that. It didn't turn out well.
Yeah.
And so, it's for me, it's a lot of partnering with God is understanding His voice is tied to peace. And so, yeah, I've gotten peace with difficult decisions that aren't always clear, but there's peace to it. And then there's exciting things that have a little anxiety to them that I've learned to say no to.
That's good. Which, I say this quite often. It's like whatever we're impressed with, we're going to be influenced by. And if we're impressed with good, exciting opportunities, we'll ignore the nudges, we'll ignore the peace element of it, and we'll justify, well, this makes sense. We puzzle piece, and we're like, well, I had a word about this before. God said this because it's going to happen. And look, it's right there. And we disengage from the peace, the relational aspect of it. And we just assume this must be God. And we make those decisions instead of staying engaged and not being impressed with the opportunity, but following the voice of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is not always easy.
No, it's
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to ask one question, go back to, you talked about living, getting God's heaven's perspective to bring that in. How have you learned to get heaven's perspective in your company in this journey that you've been walking out?
Yeah, I think so. What one of the things that I've the way God speaks to me is in my kind of visionary leader way. So I see things, God reveals things to me in advance. And so the challenge often is to put a timeline to some of those things. And so that's where I've learned that marrying that with how we're going to get there is part of the challenge. So for me, like I feel like my walk with God gives me a longer term vision, and then as I'm bringing people into that, the perspective then is I don't know if that's heaven's perspective. I feel like I kind of I'm in tune with that. The challenge then is to how you walk that out, and I think how do you pace it in a way that is doable for the organization that you can actually execute on.
Okay,
Right.
I'm going to bring up an example that I remember with us that we talked through. That so you were, I can't remember his name, but he was a lower level individual. So maybe you can remind me of the full story. But we were praying about a higher level executive that we felt like you were looking for to hire, or a higher level manager. I can't remember which one it was. Do you remember the story I'm talking about? And there's Okay. And as what I recall is we're praying about who to hire. And I felt like I had a sense, and this is where the prophetic kind of intertwines with practicality, getting heaven's perspective. Is you, like you say, you get a longer term vision. Like I see this, but now how do I execute this with a team that's around me that didn't see that vision, didn't have that word? How do I walk with them? And we had a sense that there was somebody within lower level that we could develop, you could develop into that place. And you recognize his name, you recognize who it was, but then you realize that you couldn't just bring him up to this level and say, hey, he's the guy to hire. You had to go through the vetting process. So you had to go through all the interviews, and then you had to go and actually, do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was the process of like, we had a clarity of who that person was, but you didn't have to just come in. You didn't just come and said, I know who it is. This is the person, because they're not all saved. They're not all doing that. So you had to figure out, how do you bring them in the process? And I actually remember getting a little frustrated at one point, like, Todd, you already know the answer. Come on. And you're like, I can't do that. I have to
Yeah.
walk with people.
Yeah. So this is that goes to part of our identity, and part of our part of our identity that I've been wrestling with for years is do we manufacture our products or not? We 35 years ago we sold our main product for $100. 35 years later we're still selling not the same product but very similar product for $100. And a lot of that is automation and productivity gains, but a lot of it has moved to Asia. A lot of it's in China. We're talking about this right in this tariff war we got going on right now.
Which we'll get
But
to that in a little bit.
so we've got a remnant, if you will, of manufacturing capabilities in our organization. And this particular individual, more of a manufacturing background, more manufacturing culture, and we were looking to hire somebody that was more of a sourcing expert. God told me to hire the manufacturing guy, and he was good in a lot of other ways, so it wasn't a huge stretch. But as you say that now, it's part of that identity that right now we're refiring up our manufacturing base because of trade wars. So just here we go years down the road where that is just reinforcing God knew something that I didn't at the time.
Interesting. I didn't even think about that, because so he's probably playing a key role in this change of direction or refocus right now.
Yeah, I mean him and the team that he's got around him in the face of crippling tariff costs for our organization. There's also opportunities in it, and some of the opportunities our competitors, none of our competitors in our space have the ability to turn on the manufacturing arm that we do. I mean, China offers a lot of opportunities for people to get in and get a very good product, but at a low cost. It's not the easiest thing in the world to manufacture, but we've got the ability to do that. So,
Yeah. We keep bringing up about the tariffs. So right now we're in the midst of navigating, as Trump has issued a bunch of tariffs, especially in China, which we'll get into that story and what you're doing navigating. But I want to come back to what we are just talking about with this young man, because it's like many times we've had conversation, you can see where the company's going, But again, putting that timeline to it has been challenging. And I think a lot of people listening to it can relate to that. It's like, I see the vision, I know what we want to do, but then the timeline and the expectation, and to walk with people with that journey. Uh, your part of your culture is, I'm not just here as a dictator. We're just going to do whatever I say. You're there for collaboration. You're there for empowering people to be able to be who they are as we go together, because it's not just about what you're doing, it's about the whole team. And
Hmm.
so your journey, even hiring him, I remember it was months in the process, because you're like, nope, we got to go through the right vetting system. I already know what God's saying. So I'm gonna have these interviews, even though I know that's not the Lord, but my team needs to feel this process out and to see it for themselves. I already know what God's doing.
So
And so,
at the time, my entire executive team was saying, no to this person, and looking at something else. And so I value the input of my team. So I wrestled with that a lot. I just felt the Lord saying that, they're wrong. This is your guy. Today, he's the only one still on the team. The rest of the team,
wow.
through through one way or the other, some of it was my doing, has left because they don't match the identity. Not that they're bad people. Most all of them are believers. That they wanted this company to be something different.
Which I think is huge that people hear, because I think that understanding your purpose, your identity, your vision, your values really determines the direction you're going. And then you can recognize, are the right people at the right seat? Are the right people on the bus, and are they in the right seat, as that phrase goes in that process? And if they're not aligning, not again, they're bad, or their giftings and skill set and their vision, it doesn't align with where this company is going right now, then it doesn't mean it's bad. It's like, this is not the right seat for you. This is not the right place for you. How can we help you in that process? But that really determines who's on the bus.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does.
Yeah, some of my favorite stories I tell over and over, Todd. I just got to bring him up in this podcast because I think it's good to connect the dots of you, and then we'll jump into the current season, because I think it's really important how to navigate. You've really built this relationship with the Lord and walking with God to help navigate the unknowns, the seasons of the storms, the challenges that are going on, even especially right now with the tariffs that's happening, which we'll dive in there. But a couple of my favorite stories with you is, one, you're about to release a high level executive, a VP, in your company, and just the challenges of navigating. There weren't an alignment of certain things weren't getting done. Great person, great individual, but it wasn't the right things were not working well. And you came onto the call, if I recall correctly, came on the call like, hey, really believe I'm supposed to fire my VP. I think it's VP of sales, and at that time, he said, I'm just having a hard time. I said, okay, well, have you asked the Lord if you're supposed to? And you're like, I kind of think so. And I said, okay, let's just stop and do it. So we did, and we asked the Lord, Lord, am I supposed to release him? And is it time for him to go? And you felt the Lord say yes. And then right after, I said, great. Now ask the next question, why? And we felt like the Lord showed you, showed both of us the different things. If you'd stay, it's like his life would just die, shrivel up and die. But if you got released, he would actually step into the purpose of God. And my recollection of the conversation was like, oh, I get to do what God's doing. Like, this is part of his plan. And it just shifted your perspective to let him go. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember that. Yes, yeah. I mean, so that individual who was with me, I wasn't even here a year, and I hired that individual. It happened to be my brother-in-law, even.
Well, I didn't want to bring that up. I didn't know if you were going to do it. So he was here for 20 years, and he was your brother-in-law, which is the challenge of letting him go in that moment.
Yeah, I mean so there was a lot of reasons to ignore kind of what you're hearing, what you're sensing, because you don't want it to end. But some of it, I just hear him things that come out of his mouth. If you're paying attention, you're like, your heart is elsewhere. And so, yeah, I mean, I hemmed and hawed about that a lot and talked to my wife about it. So he's married to my wife's sister, and uh, we did a lot together in this company, and it's just a different company, different season. And we parted ways. It's been 5 years ago now, and I think you've looked back, and the timing was really good because I was able to treat him well and honor him well in a severance kind of package. Because years later, it would have been really hard to do,
Yeah.
just financially. where we were in the business. But there would be some things I do differently in how I handled that. I do think I obeyed and worked through it, and him and I still have a good relationship. And yeah, I think ways of people that I've learned, and as I've matured over the years, I've always kind of felt like when it's time to release people, it's the good of the company versus the individual. You got to get past the challenges in it, but it's still, it's not fun to do. You feel bad. You got to deal with but I've had enough experiences, that being probably a highlight, where things are even though you don't know what it's going to look like for that individual, you trust that God's got a plan, and when it's time, they have to go somewhere else. I've got example after example of people that when they left here, they've done better.
Hmm.
They're in a better place, and I think that's helped me through that, and given you confidence that when it's time, it's the right thing to do for the organization and the individual. Also helps in the hiring process too, because you start to learn, you know, how do I identify who this person is, and are they a fit for the company's identity? So the more that's you press into that and
It's good.
try to figure that out, the better I've done at matching people to that.
Yeah. But by the way, just that aspect of your brother-in-law leaving, if I remember correctly, too, you get a word or you get the clarity. Okay, I know this is what I'm supposed to do, and then you walk out with trying to honor the best way you can, severance package, honor him within the company, different things like that. It still didn't make it easy. It was still a hard process at times because of just the navigating a relationship and challenges. And if I just remember conversations, if I recall correctly, you having to go back to like, but I know this is what I felt like the Lord said to do, and so I know I did the right decision. It's easy when you're 5 years down the road, you're like looking back, well, yep, that was the right decision. But in the moment, even though you had the word of the Lord, it didn't make it as like it's butterflies and cakes and parties and it's the best thing ever. It was still a challenge, right?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a challenge, and I think, eh, and I didn't want to do it. I mean, I think it was one of those things where I kind of grudgingly obeyed what I was hearing. That's where, if I go back, I think I'd have more confidence and faith that this was going to be good.
I gotcha. That's interesting. So
and,
your
and
perspective of how you stepped
and
into
by
it.
having more faith in the outcome, it would improve the process that I
Oh,
moved
wow.
through to get there.
Huh,
Yeah.
that's really good. That's interesting because I think that does affect it. Like we can obey grudgingly, and what we choose to do in the process can actually sow seeds for the actual execution or the fruit of that. But if we can do it with confidence and faith, saying, "Okay, God, I trust you. I know you. You can do it with love, grace, and confidence that this is the best thing you're able to do it." That's very interesting. I think there's a lot more to unpack on that one, but that's very good. So the other testimony I love sharing, I do it a lot because I talk about how the presence of God changes everything. And we know that. And a lot of times I'll say to business owners, I'll say, how would you like Jesus to walk into your boardroom? They're like, that'd be awesome. I said, let me teach you how. But one of the examples I use, though, is this time that you came in and on this call, and you were just, I could see the heaviness on you. You had a lot of decisions to make. You're feeling kind of stressed out on stuff. I know it's only happened once. It was only that one call. But in that process, we were there, and I'm like, well, we can't make any decisions in the place you're at. I want you to do me a favor. And I put on a song by Cody Carnes, Nothing Else. I don't know if you remember this.
Hmm.
It was like a 9-minute song, and I just put play on it. I mean, we're here. We have a consulting agreement. You're paying me money for helping you and navigating. And here I go play worship music. But in the process, what happened, I knew what was going to happen is the presence of God came to the call. Tears, I just saw a couple tears come down your cheek. I don't mean to embarrass you, but I saw a couple tears come down your cheek, and I said, what's going on? And this was what I recall is like, man, I came in here with like 20 questions. I feel like I'm leaving with 4 answers. I feel like I just gained 4 hours of my day back. This is the most productive thing I've done all day. I don't even remember that situation
Yeah.
particularly, but
Yeah.
it's something that's marked me just of how that presence changed your day or that situation. Unpack that for me a little bit, how that affected you and how that's helped you ongoing.
Well, yeah. Okay. So it's an example of the presence of God, and it's learning, what does that feel like? What is that peace and that joy that comes with that? in an environment where a day in the life of a business and out in the world, and not the bubble of a conference or a Sunday morning service is rather messy. But it was an example of learning to value the presence. I mean, I was just we went to a conference here recently at my local church, and I used to go to conferences because I liked the teaching and like it's like now I go because after 3 days at a conference, just the presence and the joy and the peace that I feel from that is tangibly different. And we make better decisions when we're in that place. I certainly do. And it's just a value system for that. Having experienced that, I want it more. I better understand the presence of the Holy Spirit in me versus on me. I thought you were going to talk about the one time when I said, "Well, I can't walk around and distribute the presence if it's not in me or if it's not on me."
Yep, I remember that too.
But I think that's an example of just how to navigate the challenges of business is through and with the presence of God.
Yeah. So how have you created that, as you said, as a core value or lifestyle? How have you created that as an ongoing lifestyle? And can you give me some maybe examples, like when you've been in chaotic, stressful moments? What have you done that's been helpful to reshift your focus and attention?
It's largely being quiet and learning to walk in the presence, to invite the presence. The presence of God is not going to fall on me when I'm listening to a lot of inner dialogue about all the bad things that are going to happen, and listening to fear. So for me, it's shutting out, fear and anxiety over a situation, and seeking. So tariffs. I'll give you an example. Tariffs right now are a terrifying thing in terms of, if you look at a dollar amount that by China doesn't pay the tariffs, we pay the tariffs, and it's a big bill. And it's devastating to our annual budget and plan. And so that creates, in fact, we rescheduled this because the day we were going to do it was the day after Liberation Day. And I needed more presence on me than I had. But in it, and even with this, there's a lot of opportunities in it, and things get revealed. It's one for me. It's as simple as valuing it, and then seeking it. I tried to seek it before I valued it, and first it's
So
having enough experience with it. So okay, that's tangibly different. That's tangibly better. If I don't know how to get there, I sit and seek, and I'll go out, sit in my truck for an hour, and I may be sitting quiet. I may put some worship music on, but it's different ways at different times. But it's a process of seeking.
yeah, which I love that you have a value for, so then you seek it versus seeking as you should. Because if you value it, then you're going to embrace it and actually glean from it versus I did what I was supposed to do. And I think that's really important. And I'm glad you asked. I was going to ask you what's the practical things. What I heard you say and experienced from you at different times, there you sometimes you just close your door and you just put some worship music on. Sometimes you get out to your truck and just get alone. Sometimes you just get into a quiet place, whether it's at your house or doing something just with your hands that you're not thinking about work, just to go and unpack and get reconnected. So there's different ways that you unplug to reconnect or rest so that you can have that experience of his presence and peace, is what I found and heard from you through your journey.
Yeah, yeah,
Which you alluded to, by the way, that one story, like that revelation, like, wait a second, my team or I think it was during COVID, it was like, I can't give away what I don't have. And it was that element of you going and praying and just declaring over your whole campus or your whole work environment, just the peace and the healing and the protection of God over it, if I remember correctly. And you're like, wait, I can't give away what I don't have.
yeah.
So you stopped, reconnected, and went and did it, which was phenomenal. We could go on and on, a lot of stories. I mean, that's the thing I love about this is a journey, but we've been talking, referring to the tariffs quite a bit. So I want to bring in a real life situation because it is the ups and downs. I mean, we talk about wins and, experiencing God and how God showed up and these good things, but life is filled with tension. It's filled with this, breakthroughs and God showing up and the not yets or the challenges or the unexpected things that we're doing. I mean, even with COVID being the peak of the times, we're excited. We're navigating so much growth in that process. And then within the next 2 years, it's like whoop, right down where we're actually realizing there's a lot of things we didn't see in the company. There's things that you realize with your CFO and finances that you had to dive in and unpack, and it's a mess and it's not fun, but it was going consistently. You're trying to get back to that place of peace to navigate those unknowns and those challenges. But right now you're facing a real big challenge. And so I just want to unpack that a little bit. And you referred to it. We were actually scheduled to do a podcast a couple of weeks ago and then get a call. It was like, hey, we just got the news that there's 100% tariffs going on right now. And this just changed everything for us. So I want to kind of unpack that process of what happened when, just the journey of you finding out the news. How did that affect you? And then how did you walk that out? And the reality is, like you said, it's fears knocking at the door. All these things are real. And so not avoiding those things. But so what's been the process for you? If you can kind of explain that what's going on in this situation, and then how did you process it?
Yeah. Well, so for me personally, being a visionary leader, my mind just takes things into the future. And what tariffs do is it completely, you don't know what's going to happen one day to the next, just in that. But if you just take the tariffs and what we're doing with China, it's going to greatly affect our supply chain, how we make products. In some cases, we won't be able to make a certain product because of just cost structure. We can't do that. So it's a recalibration of how we're going to restructure almost everything. And so that creates a lot of, I said, I'll run here and needing data, don't have data. So you don't know. And so that creates a lot of anxiety and just, I need to know. And the more I know, the more, so I'm living in a lot of unknown. For me, it's really seeking, okay, so this is going to cut both ways for us. There's going to be some bad aspects, but there's also going to be some opportunities. And so obviously focusing on the opportunities, talking through those helps with that anxiety. But it's also where I've learned to rely on, boy, that doesn't look good. And that nobody's going to buy that anymore. And so then the business is going to be this size, not that size. I have to go back to some things that God has spoken to me. Some of my thoughts about where things are going are incongruent with what I've heard. And so I'm like, nope, I've heard this, which is more prosperity than I'm envisioning. And so in a season where I don't know, it's past promises that I'm focusing on. That's that good. Helps me get through the time period where I don't know, and it helps me maintain my peace in a anxious time period.
Which I think is absolutely key to navigate, keep hope alive. Because if you have no hope, it's underneath the influence of lie. So we lose our hope. We're actually now living under the influence of a lie, whether it's fear, it's destruction, you're going to lose everything, all these different lies that come in to try to get you agree with, to then just throw in the towel. And we're talking about real business, real money, real lives, this company's been existing for a long time into that process. And so what I'm hearing you say is that you're going back to what God has said, his promises to keep hope alive. Say, okay, I want to align my vision with what you said so that I know that you're going to work all things out for good. You're going to actually do what you said you did. So now I can not lose my hope, but then I also can have peace, because we also often say a lot of times, if you don't have peace, you have no authority. And instead of being a victim to the situation, without peace, you're now at peace that you can actually you have authority to have wisdom and clarity and even navigate this storm versus, oh, we're dead, we're going to get swallowed up by it. So that's what I'm hearing from you, which I think is really key in navigating these significant changes. Because what I heard from you a couple of weeks ago is like, before, when the initial tariffs came out, it was like, well, we just found out that the profit margin we thought we were going to have of millions of dollars is gone because of the tariffs. And I said, how you doing? He goes, well, I believe God's in the midst of it. He's going to do it. There's kind of hope still in the midst of it. Like, it's not like we wanted, but we're doing it. And then the next call was, Tim, I don't know if we have a company because of the tariffs. And so there is, I mean, that's drastic. That's massive to go from, okay, we lost profit margin to our CEO because you're now a chairman of the company to our team is feeling like we got to shut down.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's where we're at. So it's certainly a giant in the land,
Yep.
and I mean, it doesn't look good in many ways, but the more you unpack it, the team's working through that, we're finding opportunity in the face of it. And I would say, I'd say you work through it yesterday. I worked through it, all the preventative things from a board meeting, and here's what we got to know. And it's somewhat frustrating and discouraging. Come in this morning, and we've got optimistic viewpoints coming out of it, and that carries myself and the team through that. We probably won't have any profit this year, but we're restructuring some things that are going to make us stronger for the future. So
Yep. Okay, I want to go back to our conversation 2 weeks ago, though, because I feel like that was the key point. Maybe it wasn't, but I felt like it was important in the process of it because there was the heaviness of the news. And so many people that are listening, like they just got bad news. They don't know how it's going to happen. They can't make payroll. They don't know. I mean, I'm just talking to a political leader who, had many promises that they're going to win the election and they lost. And like, now what? Like, this is not what I thought was going to happen. This is not an alignment with all the things that God has. And so discouragement's knocking at the door, disappointment, frustration, hopelessness. I mean, they're all at a table saying, come on, Todd, come sit with us because there's no point even trying to do it. And in that conversation, one of the things that we did is we had to get back to truth. What has God said? You alluded this before. What has God said? Who is God? And we had to go back to the truth and the nature of what God has already done, looking at the testimonies, how he's been faithful, remembering how he's come through in so many different scenarios, the testimonies of the breakthrough, the testimonies of the clarity. That it doesn't matter where it's at now, those testimonies are true. And it was kind of that rewiring of getting back and recalibration. I've got to remember the truth of who God is in order to get back to connected to peace. And then out of that place, we prayed, we got recalibrated. And then it'll say, okay, now what are you saying about the situation? Not what do we do? Do we close? Do we fire? Do we not? It's just like, Lord, what's your narrative? What's your perspective? What are you saying? And I'm trying connecting the dots of what you just said, because you said now we're coming with some optimism. We're seeing different opportunities, but that stemmed, if I recall, just part of it, you recalibrating to, I got to get God's perspective over this. I got to see what he's saying over this. Otherwise, I'm just going to be trudging through waters trying to survive.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and that's a process, So like I have new information, and so you're recalibrating, and and there's a lot of things to react to, and there's a lot of news on your phone that isn't good. And that's where just learning to navigate things with God is shut the phone away and just sit in it. And okay, so what? And I'll ask the question. Okay, so what are the opportunities, or what can I see here, Lord, that
Yeah.
I'm not seeing?
Yeah.
And you wait in, and you're like, all right, so you have you have this option, you have that option. Um, it's I said it's the further we get into it, and we're seeing, and I'm saying it cuts, anything that's happening in this case, it cuts both ways. So there's a lot of things that impact us negatively. There's also a lot of strategic opportunities in it.
But it sounds like what you've done for yourself as well as your team is you're tapped into, some people call it optimism, but I call it hope in God's perspective of what he wants to do. Like you're recognizing and you're bringing it to the team. Instead, you could have come in there like, yeah, guys, I have no idea. I don't know what we're going to do. And they're like, the hope just goes out the door, but you're shifting to what can we do? There's something, a silver lining here. There's something else, because you started, instead of like, well, we're stuck, to, okay, God, if that's what's happening, you're going to reroute us. What is the direction? What do you want us to do? Because you got a solution in the midst of this challenge.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I'd like to say I'm not even really leading the team through it right now, Tim. I mean, I'm leading myself through it. and trying to deal with that and interact with the team and really understand, when I show up, my presence is important. So if I show up with peace on me, it's gonna share that. And that's it's really also, the journey of where I'm at right now in the business and what I'm struggling with. I just had a conversation with somebody in purchasing. It's like, uh, this right now, the fact that I'm not more hands on in the business is challenging to me because there's things to do, and I've got to trust that the team is doing those things and trust and patience. One of the things, even before the tariffs, that I realized is man, like I've put myself in a position where about the only thing I can do for the business right now, other than show, is pray, or the most effective thing I can do is pray. And I'm like,
Okay, explain why that's what happened with that. What, because we didn't go into why your roles. So explain why is that your position now?
well, so I've stepped out of the CEO role of managing and hired somebody into that seat to do that. Felt like the Lord was telling me it's time, it's a new season, and to step out of this. And I thought I was going to lead me somewhere else quickly, and it's leading me to this spot of I'm so I've got more time on my hands than I want to have, and the business is facing challenges that I personally want to fix. And I'm not in a role in the business where it needs me. It's like, yep, we got that figured out. We got to figure it out. I'm like, okay. So I'm at a point where I'm the most effective thing I can do is pray, which is
Eh,
which is which is challenging me right now. And do you think that's important and valuable, or is this something you do? And so this is a new season for me of just what I bring into existence through prayer is exactly where God is with me right now. That's where I
Wow.
am in my journey there. It's valuing that. Do I believe in prayer and the effectiveness? Yes. When I'm faced with it, this is why I like when I work with God in my business where I'm called to, it really challenges all my beliefs and how strongly I believe them and where I'm at in my maturity in my walk with Him.
Which is interesting. So just paraphrasing the journey you're in, because you're now acting chair, or you're the chairman of the company. You were CEO, but the Lord spoke to you and said your season has shifted, and so you let go of the reins, even though in a lot of ways it's like don't do that yet, because if you're going to sell, if you're going to do this, or you're going to do this, like you should be in this position, but you knew the Lord was saying this is what you need to do, and God highlighted the right person to come in and take that place, and so you shifted out of that role, which was a transition of just obedience and trust, having a perspective like, oh, God, you're transitioning me to something else. We have this, it's amazing how we put expectations on obedience based upon, and we obey based upon what we feel like is going to happen. And then we get into that place and we're like, oh, it's not happening that way. Some of us then question, did I hear God? Did I not? I know you never question God, but in the midst of, I have done that where I'm like, did I hear right? Did I miss this? Because it didn't turn out the way we thought, but yet God is actually going after something even more in the process. But now, fast forward, I like to be in control. I like to be able to, if something's a problem, I want to jump in and fix it. And God has you removed from that position. You get to speak into it. You get to bring hope. You get to give perspective and ideas and things. But the execution and the strategy and the walking out is different. And so he's invited you. I love what you just said. He's invited you that your role right now is to pray and to shift things in the atmosphere, to pray in the spirit, to be able to awaken. I mean, you didn't say this, but I'll unpack it. But when we pray, things in the atmosphere change. It creates a culture, an atmosphere for people to receive, to have innovation, to have creativity, and see the perspective, to release hope into the atmosphere. And I think actually most business owners need to get that instead of depending on what they know how to do. Because if we as leaders begin to pray more and to create the atmosphere, I think we'll see more efficiency, more growth, more productivity, more fruit in those places. Then I know how to work. So I'm just going to show up and go get things done.
I agree with that, and but I would agree with that before I moved into a different position, and now I'm realizing. He goes, well, you didn't believe that as much as you thought you did, and so that's why we're working on that. He's funny out there. Yeah.
Todd, I remember this one statement. I'll go to it in a second, but we've said this over and over that off a man that we respect, a leader who says, God's more after building the man than he is the business. And that has been a phrase we've said often in our conversations. But I remember one time you and working together, there's one meeting that you just had this epiphany or this revelation is like, wait a second, my whole job is just to do what the Father's doing. My whole job is just to be obedient to what he's doing. This business is just my playground. I just get to have fun with him. And it was that journey of God working in you to develop you to be an overflow wherever you're at. It's not so much of accomplishing something, but it's about obedience and walking with him. Unpack that a little bit for me.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And it reminds me, I was just talking to my wife earlier today. She's in a position where she's managing a boutique, and she's talking about hiring somebody that's right for the business. And then she's like, I'm gonna hire myself out of a job. I reflected on my journey of moving through roles and what I'm learning about. There's more. In some cases, there's more to a higher level role than I knew, and so it's been the obedience of saying move. Like, okay, well, I don't know where I'm gonna, but I'll move because I'll move. And then I say in a season of kind of pouting about it and then figuring it out. But it's the obedience to move, and that's I go back to my brother-in-law. It's like I obeyed, but my process of how was I can look back on and say, Father matured me through that season, so I would go back and do that differently. I encourage people to move even though you don't have everything figured out.
That's good.
To make a decision to obey and act, because it's like, well, maybe as long as our intent is to obey, because I'll be honest, I mean, you don't, was that the Lord? Was that me?
It's real.
I don't hear it. I don't hear tangible move. There's some tangible things that I'm like, yeah, that's just not coincidence. But a lot of time it's acting and then reflecting back on and saying, yeah,
it's true.
That was right on.
Yeah. One of the things
we don't know until we act. And it's just in the process of moving through the business, moving through these roles, a lot of cases I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll obey because I want to go do this now.
Yep.
And so why I obey sometimes gets a little out of.
That's I have this saying, a lot of times we obey because of the ROI or what we think is we're going to get instead of just the act of obedience, no matter what's happening. And I think that's a journey we're all in, because I mean, sometimes I think it's to God that uses those things to get us off our tail to start moving in a direction. I like to add, as we wrap up, one of the things about the obedience is a lot of leaders hear and they said, okay, got it. And they just run. But I think the act of obedience, we just need to go and obey. I think that's a word of the Lord for a lot of people right now, but it's staying engaged in the process. And I watched you do this really well at many times where you obey, but you're keeping your hands open. You're constantly like, I'm just being with the Lord as we go. It's not just, okay, he said it, I'm going to do it. That's it. But it's a process of I'm staying engaged and I just keep walking because I know he said to do it. I don't understand it all. I don't see the outcome fully. I don't know how this is going to happen. I've heard you say it over and over, but I'm going to keep going. And then you reroute if the Lord says, okay, stop. And there's been times the Lord said, okay, so now stop. Or wait, hold up on that one. Okay, now move this direction. And I think that's the other additive to add to the obey, step out and go. Stop waiting for the another 10 confirmations. Stop waiting for you to understand everything. Stop waiting to do it because you believe in it fully and understand every aspect of it. Just obey, but stay connected because the Lord will lead you in the process of it. And I think that's just a pivotal point of what you're talking about of we got to get up and just obey and stop waiting until we understand it all.
Yeah.
One other thing, I just want to, as we're wrapping up, I just want to acknowledge one of the things I love you as a leader is it's challenged me because it's one thing to share prophetic insight to you. Say, hey, I feel like you're supposed to do this. Hey, I feel like God's saying this. Well, you got to go and make it work. And like you got a team, you got hundreds of employees, you've got millions of dollars you're managing. It's not just a good sense from the Lord. Like, great, it's going to poof, there it is. Many of our conversations have been, so how's that going to work? So what do I do with that? Which has been a great challenge to me in just the practicalities of taking and asking the next question. So Holy Spirit, what do you mean by that? So what does that look like today? What do I need to do to unpack it? And I've watched that with you as well. And I'm just so grateful for how you've stewarded pursuing his voice. You value it. You value his presence. You value his peace and you've pursued it. You've sought after it. And out of that place, I think I've watched you even this is a big deal what you're dealing with the tariffs right now. I mean, a big deal. Where I would say 5, 10 years ago, it would crush you. And now though, in the midst of it, you're able to pivot, even though there's times of overwhelm and stuff like that. You're like, okay, no, I know God said this. I know this is what's true. And you're able to rebound really quickly or quicker in that place to have perspective, to have hope, and actually have authority, like being able to pray over your team, over your company, over that thing, and have perspective even in your position. So just want to acknowledge like your testimony is so important as people are listening to this of just what's possible, no matter what role you carry, recognizing what is my assignment in this role. God, what are you trying to teach me? And then how do I walk that out with you?
Yeah. Well, no, I appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, our testimonies are important, and part of the way we get through these things and navigate them is as with other people, right? And so the more we share and I'm a big believer in getting together with other CEOs and working through issues, not even just business issues, just how do we process just the loneliness of running an organization.
Yep, absolutely. So, any last thoughts you want to leave people with? Things that you've learned, or anything you want to just release over people?
No, I think I appreciate the time to jump on and reflect back on the journey. I think one of the things just working with you over the 3 years or so that we've worked through, you know, partnering with God is just one realizing that through that I've heard God more than I thought I did over the years, and it helps me understand how God speaks to me. He speaks to me differently than you, my wife, others, but it's just a process of working through and experimenting with. I think I liked kind of how we're ending it and wrapping it up is just you gotta not be afraid to make a mess. And I just go back to, unless there's if it feels like you're gonna blow something up, you probably are. If there's peace on it, more than likely you're hearing.
It's good. Yeah. I like this, the saying of, it's green until it's red, but also don't be afraid of moving forward because God's big enough to reroute you. And so it's like I say, like Google Maps, you make a wrong turn, reroute. God's so good. He's a good father that take the risk or take the steps out, trust in the peace. But if you make a mistake, it's okay. He'll reroute you because you're yielded, you're surrendered, and you're looking for that too. So, so grateful, Todd. Thanks so much for the time that you've just invested into those that are listening, just sharing your story, your testimony, but actually living out, because it takes a lot of work to live it out, not just to, hey, look at the win, but you push through the breakthrough so that other people can have it too. So thanks so much for being with us.
You bet. Thank you, Tim.